That's her. My park. My baby. You know, I'm only the superintendent here, but I feel like the father of 3,000 beautiful acres. Sometimes I think I know every one of them like it was my front lawn. I guess that's why I still get upset when people come in and do all kinds of silly things here, simply because they don't think of the park as their home. Well, it's bound to happen. And out of 10,000 people, you couldn't expect everyone to behave themselves for the whole weekend, would you? It wouldn't be natural. The problems in a park are really the same as city problems. The more problems society and the cities have, the more problems I have. That's fair enough. Everybody wants to get away from the long, hot summer in the city, the noise and tension and demands of school teachers or bosses at that part-time job. Fresh air and a few cases of beer are a wonderful way of letting off steam. And a great way of meeting girls. Girls are a wonderful audience. If they weren't paying attention to the boys' shenanigans, they'd probably forget it. If you can't show off, if you can't hassle some guy and upset his wife and 3 kids, there wouldn't be any fun doing it. So that's how it starts. A little sun, a little beer, and a load of fun. 2 fellas staggering in Friday night with a pup tent and 8 cases of beer. That's 8 cases of beer, but no food. Now, I first came to a park on the Victoria Day weekend, May 24th. I just couldn't believe my eyes. Beer bottles piled up in pyramids 4 feet high, beer bottles ringing the campsite, 2 complete rings. And remember, our sites average 40 by 50 feet. They drink too much and they can't handle it. They take on a completely different character. What just a moment ago was mischief becomes a torrent of abuse and a release of anger and frustration. A large group becomes rowdy. And a few guys who need to show off start the vandalism. So off they go through the park like a herd of wobbly baby elephants who just can't help bumping into things, knocking them over and smashing them. You don't need a guide to follow these elephants along the trail of empty bottles and past the picnic tables that somebody's overturned or whittled with a knife. Or even started chopping up for a fire. Picnic tables are talented things. You often find ones that have jumped over a cliff or gone for a swim in the rapids or the lake. And not to be outdone, partitions fly off their hinges in comfort stations. Windows break and doors smash. Once our guardhouse saw what a good time everybody else was having and caught fire out of sheer envy. Burned right down. The next night, the vault toilet threw a fit and ended up over in its side out of action and useless to everybody. It's not hard to follow the trail of the baby elephants. Dollar damage is one thing. What really sets me off is the vicious, brutal damage to the park itself. And don't these people know that if you girdle a maple tree and remove a foot of bark all the way around the tree, that tree's going to die? or that the sapling they trample will never wear a green crown to shade somebody's picnic, or maybe give a little privacy for some cuddling? Oh, they're a real fun bunch, my baby elephants. Now, that's not quite what you think if you need to use the comfort station and find it's a mass of jagged porcelain. It's certainly not what you think when they're hollering and whooping and screaming till 4 and 5 in the morning. These jokers don't need a park or a campground. You could put them in a cornfield or gravel pit, and they'd have just as much fun. They forget that a party in a park is nearly the same as one at home in the city. There are no walls to hold back the sound, and there's actually less space per person on a campsite than in some apartments. First-time visitors don't realize some of these things, simple things, which can be explained beforehand during daylight hours by the visitor service staff. Now, visitor service can't talk with each camper personally, but they make sure that everyone gets a copy of our park bulletin. Of course, elephants seldom have time to read. Or they forget what they've read. I find their memory improves considerably when I suggest we go back to my office and call their parents for a little chat. So, what if it is 4 in the morning? Wouldn't Dad like to know what a great time Sonny is having? Other times, I remind the holder of the campsite permit that he's responsible for behavior on the site. And after all, you have 2 ways of dealing with wild elephants. You can stop them with an elephant gun, or you can frighten them with a mouse. I use the mouse instead of the gun whenever possible. Prevention is so much more pleasant for me than enforcement, and far less messy. Why, it may take 2 hours to evict a site if the occupants are excited and you have to do their packing for them. I always call in the OPP to help with eviction, but they don't seem to take down tents any faster than I do. I start off by giving people the benefit of the doubt, especially if a cranky middle-aged camper has laid the complaint. The first complaint I ever had was from a chronic case, complaining that the baby on the next site had kept him awake all night, and what was I going to do about it? Now, as a superintendent, I can do anything that's necessary short of changing diapers. The Parks Act gives me the power and authority of an OPP officer inside my park. I can arrest people or issue summary conviction tickets, which means the person must pay a fine or show up in court to argue his case. I mainly handle Parks Act violations, but I can enforce all other laws, the Highway Traffic Act, the Liquor Act, and laws that apply to the use of marijuana and other drugs. The conservation officer in the park also has OPP authority, and most of these fellows have a law enforcement background. I trust them to handle people and situations on their own. Or call the OPP detachment just outside the park for support. But it's a different thing with the boys I hire for security staff in the summer. Sometimes, when they put on the Sam Brown belt and the flat hat, it changes them completely. Some of them want to lay down the law, and that's exactly what they're not supposed to do. My fellows are there to watch, to report, and back up the CO and the OPP. I choose my security staff personally and very carefully. After all, the amount of sleep I get this summer depends on how cool and level-headed my boys are. Well, talk is and will remain the best weapon we have. But if talk or negotiations break down, it doesn't matter if I'm sleeping. The boys need assistance. Almost any kind would usually help. Even the moral support of the campers on the next site. But adults are seldom helpful. Now, their children are usually quite different, especially those in the 6 to 11 age bracket. They're not afraid to tell an adult, "You shouldn't throw that in the beach." And they're often the ones who identify the people who've done damage to park property. Cars are responsible for much of the disturbance, the noise, and the dirt in the park. That's why I insist that my security staff enforce the 1 car per campsite rule. If all additional cars have to be in the parking lot, it cuts down not only on traffic, but on the number of visitors a site gets. Visitors cause a good deal of trouble. You just can't get them to leave at 11 o'clock when their passes expire, especially if they're mixed in with the campers. That's why we had bulldozers in here 3 years ago to make separate roads for the campers and the day users. Campers now turn right, day users turn left, and with the help of a gatehouse in between, never the twain shall meet, I hope. While the bulldozers were here, the park designers made some changes in the layout of my grounds. I have nearly 700 campsites, which used to be laid out in just 2 areas. It was open like a frying pan. Activity in one corner would attract flies from all over. But now, the sites are grouped in clusters of about 100 each, with lots of buffer area between the clusters, and that helps isolate the trouble and cuts down noise. In fact, we even turned one of the sites over to the kids. Families can still camp there if they like, but they know I tolerate a little more noise in the youth section than in the family campground. But even these changes can't prevent some situations, especially if an aggressive security approach has made people mad, noisier, and meaner than they were. I remind my security staff that a campsite rampage is a little like a forest fire. You shouldn't go in at its peak unless you have to, and then you should be well prepared. Of course, you'll always find some people who are plain miserable, no matter how you treat them. I find this with most of my repeat offenders. I mean, they're not your average dicky-do bird lovers, these guys. Their idea of fun is doing damage and getting away with it, whether they're stealing a case of beer off a picnic table right under the owner's nose, or carving a monument of destruction for everyone to see, or harassing some guy by making passes at his girlfriend. Sooner or later, I catch one of them. But don't get me wrong. I'm not after convictions. I don't want my staff to earn medals, which would make life miserable for the peaceful majority as well as the unruly minority. I'd rather clean up the results of vandalism from time to time than have my security staff patrol the park with walkie-talkie in one hand and a club in the other. Hardcore solutions only create hardcore problems. Because once you've set yourself up as the tough guy in the park, there's always going to be someone around to challenge your title, to see if you can still float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. That's why I still believe the best way to avoid trouble is to prevent it before it starts. It's easier to make a house nearly fireproof than it is to extinguish the blaze. Prevention is the reason why every night around 8, we have a show of force around here like you wouldn't believe. Every vehicle is out, patrolling the park roads, and every uniformed staff member is out being seen and noticed and remembered. Sure, the guys may kid you. Hey, Yogi, I love your cute hat. But they know you're there. Always preferred talk to eviction. But I'd rather have an eviction than a conviction. I mean, I'm happy when my staff can talk these jokers out of mischief. But once you've warned them they're going to be evicted, there's no more talk. You evict. And when you've threatened them with a ticket, you write the ticket. Half of the charges laid last year in provincial parks came under the Liquor Act. Usually, I get the local OPP detachment to lay charges and see the case through the courts. Now, at the start of each camping season, I visit the sergeant to make sure he understands my problems and he knows me personally. He just can't beat personal service. I've also built up good credibility with the local judge. Because he understands my problems, we have a lot less liquor abuse than before. Now, I'm all for better training of the seasonal staff. The better trained our staff is, the more experienced in handling people, the less need there is for regulations that affect the majority of campers. And the better campers understand the reasons for our few rules, the better the cooperation we'll get from them. For ultimately, it's only the cooperation campers give me and all the other yogis that's going to make this park a great summer community.